It's Wednesday, the 28th of February 2024. Welcome to the Fast 5 Business News by Fear and Greed, where we give you the top 5 business stories you need to know in just 5 minutes. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, we've got 5 big stories to get through in 5 minutes, so we better get going. Story number 1, Coles boss Leah Weckert yesterday provided a spirited defence of the supermarket business against allegations of price gouging as she announced a strong start to 2024, which is, it must be said, stronger than arch rival Woolworths, triggering a 6% jump in the grocer's share price.
She defended Australia's grocery sector as being fiercely competitive after the group increased first half sales by nearly 4% to $227 billion. She said Coles employs 120,000 people, supports 8,000 suppliers, and pays a very large tax bill. That's before we get to the hundreds of thousands of shareholders. Now, she added that profit isn't a bad thing, explaining that Coles makes around $2.60 for every $100 a customer spends, less than 3 cents on the dollar. And that margin has been stable for at least 5 years. The nation's second largest grocery chain reported group sales from continuing operations was up about 7%. Supermarkets revenue was up nearly 5%. Liquor sales 2.5%. Supermarket price inflation has moderated somewhat. Net profit overall was down 8%.
Sean, what did she say about customers?
Well, Weckert said many Australian households are dealing with cost of living pressures where mortgage payments and rents are the biggest burden. As a result, people are looking for better deals. That means cheaper brands, cheaper cuts of meat, buying more bulk products and buying more frozen goods. They're also buying less alcohol. Interestingly, there's been less shoplifting. Coles has spent a bit of time trying to wipe that out. Weckert said this year so far, supermarket revenue was up nearly 5%. Pretty good. Woolies last week said 1.5%. Much better outcome for Coles, and that's why the share price surged yesterday.
Moving on to story number 2 now, and the gender pay gap is alive and well, Sean, with the disparity for base salaries at businesses with 100 plus employees hitting 14.5% on average, according to the Workplace Gender Equality Agency.
The gap jumped to 19% once bonuses, overtime and allowances were factored in. Now, some of Australia's top companies were among the biggest gender equality laggards. Dairy manufacturing company A2 Milk had the biggest gap in the ASX 200 at more than 40%, followed by infrastructure services provider Ventia, intellectual property firm IPH and Qantas. Beach Energy and AGL were the worst of the energy and mining giants, Commonwealth Bank of the banks. Former Sex Discrimination Commissioner Elizabeth Broderick said while it was disappointing and distressing that most businesses had gender pay gaps, she wasn't surprised. The data has triggered a rush of commentary from Prime Minister Anthony Albanese to business leaders like Andrew Forrest and the ACTU. The broad gist is that men have more capacity to earn lucrative bonuses, overtime and allowances because of historic norms that lead to women taking on more household and caregiving responsibilities. Having more men in high-earning technology and engineering fields also drove the gap. At the other end of the spectrum, accommodation and food services had the lowest median pay gap, about 2%. Other areas, education and healthcare, were also at the lower end.
Story number 3, Sean, there's a bunch of takeovers going on at the moment, or at least bids, for Aussie companies. Yesterday, cement group Adbri recommended shareholders accept a $2.1 billion buyout proposal from Irish giant CRH.
Yep, that came after 2 months of due diligence. The CSR board also said it's backing the $9 per share offer from French giant Saint-Gobain, just 6 weeks after the initial approach was made. Takeover target Alumina's share price tumbled 5% yesterday after a poor profit result, but it certainly makes the $3.3 billion bid from Alcoa just a bit more attractive. Superloop's board told shareholders to reject Aussie Broadband's bid, and according to the Financial Review, Salter Brothers Tech Fund wants to buy Prosper, which is an SME-focused fintech, for about $740 million, or about 15% of the price that it listed at back in 2019.
Ouch. Story number 4, Sean, scientists are confident that COVID-19 has triggered a surge in heart disease in the years since the worst of the outbreak, but they don't know why.
Yeah, from 2020 to 2022, 250,000 more Americans over 35 years old succumbed to cardiovascular disease than predicted based on historical trends. That's according to Bloomberg. In 2023, age-adjusted stroke mortality was almost 5% above pre-pandemic levels, while rates from deaths related to hypertensive heart disease, rhythm abnormalities, blood clots, diabetes and kidney failure were somewhere between 15 and 28% higher. COVID hasn't really had an impact on cancer and Alzheimer's. Scientists agree the effect of COVID has been profound, but they just don't know why. And that's the next big task, because that can prevent deaths if they know why.
Finally, Sean, story number 5, onto one of my favourite topics, chocolate. Well, more specifically, cocoa. And it's not actually good news, though, is it?
It's not. Prices are at an historic high, $6,400 per tonne, because output in West Africa, which supplies nearly 70% of the world's cocoa requirement, is much lower than expected due to poor weather. Not good news for chocolate lovers amongst us. Who are the big chocolate lovers? Well, the Europeans love it most. The Swiss, Germans, Brits, Irish. They consume about 8 kilos per capita. We Aussies sit around 5 kilos per capita. Cocoa apparently was first used by the Maya civilization of Central America. Another reason to love those guys. It does have health benefits, people say. I wouldn't exactly change your diet for this, but apparently it decreases inflammation, improves heart and brain health, and blood sugar and weight control. In Australia, it's a $1.9 billion industry, and we spend about 12% of that at Easter.
All right, there we go. The top 5 business stories in 5 minutes. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Wednesday, the 28th of February, 2024. Remember to hit follow on the podcast. And if 5 minutes isn't enough, you can find our longer daily show called Fear and Greed Business News, wherever you listen to podcasts. And today being Wednesday, there's a new episode of our sister podcast, How Do They Afford That, out. Today's episode is all about manifesting and how you can use manifesting to achieve your financial goals. It's actually a really good listen. I'll put a link in today's show notes. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was the Fast 5 Business News by Fear and Greed. Have a great day.